Welcome to our movie recap channel, your ultimate destination for in-depth and engaging movie summaries, whether you're looking to catch up on the latest blockbusters or revisit classic films.
The film opens with an old lady named Helga, who lives in an old structure. She experiences dementia, which makes it difficult for her to recall things. Right now, she is hearing noises from her vent, making her extremely frightened. Helga promptly calls the eradication group and requests that they come over.
Not long after, a man named Frank appears.
While heading towards the loft, he sees a peculiar liquid coming from a vent.
Is that White Hook? A terrible stench is also coming from it, but he doesn't give it much attention.
After Helga lets him inside, she makes sense of that she's been hearing noises from the vent and insists that he investigate.
Frank notices that some of his colleagues arrived here before but haven't returned.
However, the elderly person remembers nothing and is ignorant regarding what's going on with him. Talking after this, Frank begins looking for bugs in the condo. He soon finds blood on the vent and wonders how it arrived.
Then, in a stunning development, he finds a dead body, which turns out to be an associate from his organization.
Frank panics and attempts to escape, but he is suddenly dragged into the vent.
Seeing this, Helga is astonished, yet she appears to forget everything again due to her condition.
She then hears the noises from the vent and decides to call the exterminators once more, assuming that if she keeps trying, she will eventually get Expert Ventura and all will be well. The scene then shifts to 4 days earlier when we see a shooting star fall from the sky.
A chunk of discharge enters an apartment through a window and hatches a bug-like creature.
This is the apartment of a woman named Gunther, who is the building's manager and Helga's sister. Later, Helga's 12-year-old granddaughter, Charlotte, uses the air vent to secretly enter Gunther's apartment.
She is actually there to take some dolls, but she comes across the bug in the process. Charlotte is a bit curious, so she puts the bug in a matchbox and takes it with her.
After going through the vent, she sees her stepdad Ethan talking with Gunther in the hallway. The elderly person is enraged and complains about how Charlotte broke one of her windows and took her collectible dolls. She threatens Ethan, demanding that he should fix the damage or figure out how to control his daughter. In the next scene, Charlotte goes to her room, where she places the bug into a container. Moments later, Ethan arrives and scolds her for breaking into Gunther's room, but the girl denies it. From their conversation, we learn that the two don't have a good relationship. Although Ethan cares about her, Charlotte doesn't see him as her father or respect him. He then wants her to stay away from such silly things again and leaves. Later, we are introduced to Charlotte's MOM, Heather, who is spending time with her newborn baby named Liam. Heather then decides to go check on her sick mother, so she asks Ethan to look after Liam. After she leaves, Charlotte agrees to the duty for a while, but she soon gets bored and heads to her room. There, she traps a cockroach and offers it to the bug to eat. To her surprise, the creature devours the cockroach, which is 2 times its size, in one go. Impressed by the bug's ability, she finally decides to name it Sting.
Her and Sting will make a mukbang channel and get wealthy. Meanwhile, we observe that Ethan is a comic artist who is struggling with his career and providing for his family.
He has been helping with maintenance work at the building. Currently, Ethan is fixing the pipes in an apartment 1 story below when a cockroach suddenly falls on his face.
This clearly disgusts him, yet he still completes his work and meets the apartment's owner, a Spanish woman named Maria.
While Charlotte is catching more cockroaches and feeding them to Sting, it doesn't seem to be full.
It continues growing and getting bigger the more Charlotte feeds it. At night, Ethan is working on his comic book, and Charlotte also tries to help him.
They start brainstorming novel ideas together, and Heather is thrilled to see them bonding. Sometime later, Ethan walks into Charlotte's room in her absence. He looks at the container with Sting and feels strange because he has never seen such an unusual bug.
Then, Charlotte returns, and she tries to distract him from the bug. It is clear that she has started liking the creature and doesn't want to be separated from it.
Ethan then gets her into bed and says he loves her, but the young girl doesn't respond. After she falls asleep, Sting escapes from its container and starts exploring through the vent.
It eventually reaches Gunther's apartment and startles her pet parrot.
The next morning, Charlotte's family continues with their regular activities when suddenly they hear Gunther shouting.
They find her pet parrot dead in a very cruel condition, and everyone assumes it's the work of a rodent. They immediately call an exterminator, and Frank arrives shortly after.
However, after inspecting the parrot's condition, he questions if it might be the work of a rodent. Despite an extensive examination of the vent, he finds nothing definitive.
Frank simply sprays insecticide to get rid of anything that might be hidden.
Meanwhile, Charlotte is in her room spending time with Sting. It seems the bug returned to the room quietly after committing the murder. Suddenly, a cat comes by, and Sting mimics the sound.
This surprises Charlotte, as she has never heard a bug mimic voices before.
She continues to feed it with cockroaches, and Sting happily devours them all.
But suddenly, a mothball appears, which unnerves the animal.
Charlotte realizes that Sting fears the mothball and seems to be hurt by it. Soon after, Frank enters the room and insists on spraying insecticide there, but Charlotte refuses as it could harm her pet. Frank's eyes then fall on Sting, and he tries to convince her that keeping such animals as pets could be dangerous.
Despite this, the girl is unconvinced and asks him to leave.
At midnight, Sting escapes from its container again and starts crawling through the vent.
It eventually reaches Maria's apartment and startles her small dog.
We then see Maria taking sleeping pills and getting ready for bed.
She gazes at a photo of her family, revealing that she lost her entire family in a car accident ages ago. While she reminisces about her loved ones, Sting suddenly appears and bites her face, causing her to fall and hit her head on the floor.
She tries to check her injury in the mirror, but falls again and realizes that she's paralyzed.
Sting then returns and enters her mouth. Minutes later, it emerges from her body by tearing through her stomach, ultimately ending her life.
The next day, Charlotte goes to meet one of her neighbors named Eric, who lives on the first floor.
He is a science student and experiments with things in his apartment.
Charlotte shows him the bug, which has suddenly increased in size since the previous night.
She mentions that it can mimic sounds just like a talking parrot.
This piques Eric's interest, and he now wants to research the animal.
He says that he will find the best environment for Sting and build a tank to help it grow. Charlotte innocently entrusts him and leaves her pet with him.
Elsewhere, Maria's scared dog makes its way to Ethan's apartment through the vent.
When Ethan finds it, he assumes it's the unlucky creature that escaped and decides to return it to its owner. But when he reaches Maria's apartment, he is shocked to find her dead body. He immediately contacts the police and urges them to conduct an investigation.
Meanwhile, the building occupants start panicking as recently a parrot was killed, and now Maria is dead too. As the police leave, Eric calls Ethan to his place and informs him about Sting and the dangers of keeping it in the apartment. He further speculates that the animal could be the killer and suggests they hand it over to the Department of Health and Safety. Seeing its large size, Ethan is horrified, so he passes on the responsibility to Eric. Subsequently, when Charlotte learns about this, she is enraged and refuses to fully believe that her beloved pet could harm anyone.
She contends with Ethan, demanding that he isn't her dad and he has no privilege to make rules.
Angrily, she likewise expresses that she wants to reside with her genuine dad, who probably dwells in Thailand.
However, Ethan unexpectedly uncovers that her genuine dad lives in the same town, but he isn't keen on seeing her.
Hearing this, Charlotte starts to cry, as she had consistently wanted to be brought together with her dad.
Heather is currently irate at her better half for unveiling this reality to their little girl.
Meanwhile, we see that Eric hasn't given the animal over. Rather, he has kept it with him and established a climate that would be ideally suited for its development.
He needs to support the animal power so he can evolve it for his own advantage. As Eric keeps on taking care of the bug, it becomes increasingly large.
At one point, it turns out to be monstrous to such an extent that the tank can't contain it any longer.
Somewhere else, Ethan gets a call from his distributor informing him that they will never again distribute his work since it's advancing too leisurely. To exacerbate the situation, Gunter likewise shows up and excuses him from his temporary work. She guarantees that he can't deal with the structure appropriately, and as a result of him, Maria is currently dead.
Subsequently, Gunter attempts to find her feline, which she hasn't found in days. She hears yowling sounds from the vent, so she utilizes her spotlight and chooses to enter without care.
Minutes after the fact, her electric lamp quits working, and she is ruthlessly gone after by Sting. Out of the blue, in the meantime, Ethan turns out to be so disappointed with his life that he breaks things around the house, going full limb bread roll on it. Heather attempts to stop him, yet he begins contending with her too.
Sensing what is going on, Charlotte takes child Liam and retreats to her room.
She puts on earphones and starts watching recordings to divert herself while the Guardians keep contending. Sting shows up out of the blue and goes after them both, deadening them. It then hauls them and takes them to the vent. Charlotte has no clue about this until she removes her earphones and hears Maria's canine yapping lavishly. She races to research, yet Sting unexpectedly shows up and hauls the canine away.
After this, Charlotte sees blood around her condo and her folks missing. She starts to overreact. Lastly, understands that it should Sting's work.
Yet before she can concoct an arrangement to stop it, Sting shows up and accepts Lion too. Seeing this, Charlotte breaks into tears and starts faulting herself for all that she damn well ought to. Yet, in her snapshot of franticness, she unexpectedly reviews how Sting feared mothballs, which appeared to ache it.
Charlotte then, at that point, thinks of a thought and starts blending mothballs into water to make an answer. She fills a firearm with the arrangement and prepares to defy the bug.
Later, Charlotte shows up at Eric's loft and finds him attached to the roof with a spider web. She then, at that point, goes to mind Helga and finds her shockingly safe. This is on the grounds that the elderly person generally keeps mothballs in her pockets, repulsing the animal away from her.
Charlotte then, at that point, gives her grandmother the contact number of the exterminators and requests that she call them. After this, she feels more jerks with mothballs and furthermore pours the arrangement on herself.
When she enters the vent, she before long hears Ethan shouting and finds him shrouded in spiderwebs.
Charlotte pours the arrangement on him, which dissolves the networks and ultimately liberates him.
Yet similarly, as they get ready to leave, the two of them fall into the cellar of the structure. Sting then appears all of a sudden and plans to go after Charlotte, who is lying on the ground harmed. Yet Ethan rapidly splashes mothball water on it, making the animal retreat quickly.
Is that mothballs? What is going on deteriorates when they understand they are caught in the storm cellar and miss the mark on keys to get out.
Charlotte panics, guaranteeing it is her issue. Yet Ethan guarantees her that they will figure out it together. As of now, Helga hears the bizarre clamors and requires an exterminator. Straightforward before long shows up for examination, yet as displayed in the initial scene, Sting sucks him into a vent. Plane then, at that point, falls into a similar storm cellar where Ethan and Charlotte are available in a condition of frenzy.
He beats on the cellar entryway, yet nobody can hear him.
He fought Charlotte for the whole circumstance and even endeavors to go after Ethan. However, Charlotte mediates and asserts that they can tackle the issue with mothball water. Minutes after the fact, Sting again appears, so Blunt takes his nailer and takes shots at it. This damages the animal, and Plane becomes cheerful at the sight.
However, his activities likewise cause the water line to explode, and the mothball's impact starts to wear off.
Exploiting what is happening, Sting gets back to the scene and mercilessly executes Blunt, inclination defenseless. Charlotte and Ethan choose to conceal in the waste disposal unit.
Amazingly, they find Heather and Lion there, caught in spiderwebs. They utilize the last mothball water to free them, and the family is at last rejoined. Right now, Charlotte acknowledges the amount she cherishes her family, and that she generally needs to remain nearby to them. Sometimes it simply takes a freak space bug to cause you to understand these things.
Yet their blissful gathering is stopped when they notice Sting drawing nearer.
If all else fails,
Ethan plans to trap it in the waste disposal unit and kill it. But unfortunately, even in the wake of squeezing the button on different occasions, the heap doesn't fall true to form.
Having no different choices, Ethan chooses to put his life in extreme danger and reconnect the fitting himself.
He gets shocked simultaneously, but his arrangement succeeds, and the button at long last works.
Charlotte then, at that point, squeezes it, and the heap comes crashing down on the animal, in the end killing it. As the family is saved, Ethan implodes to the ground.
Heather endeavors to resuscitate him utilizing CPR, yet he stays lethargic.
Seeing this, Charlotte feels profound and frantically petitions God for her dad to be alive.
She then, at that point, starts counting from 1 to 3, and phenomenally, despite the fact that that was an exceptionally limited capacity to focus numbers, Ethan recaptures cognizance.
Charlotte then, at that point, hurries to embrace him and calls him father interestingly. She more than once says that she cherishes him, and Ethan is profoundly moved by her words. In the last scene, the family assembles around and embraces each other firmly, appreciative to have barely gotten away from death. All at once, we see a few bag eggs in the cellar compartment standing by to incubate.
It implies that the peril isn't finished at this point, and the devastation brought about by Sting was just the start.